I went to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is a scientific technical university, and I lost my belief in God there. I lost my faith. I became essentially atheist. I went on to Harvard Business School and was obviously pursuing a fairly worldly career and worldly perspective. And after I got my degree from Harvard Business School, I was invited back to join the faculty, so I found myself as a professor of marketing at Harvard Business School at the age of 29. And although it may sound rather surprising, that's actually when the bottom fell out of my world. Because ever since I had been a small child, I knew there has to be a real meaning and purpose to life, and expected to come into the real meaning and purpose of life at some point when I got older. As a matter of fact, as a child, I thought it would come at my bar mitzvah, which is like the Catholic confirmation when the child is 13 and enters into a personal relationship with God. I thought I would enter into a personal relationship with God. When that didn't happen, it was actually one of the saddest days of my life, but then I got distracted with worldly life, so to speak, high school and university and Harvard Business School and so forth. But I always thought there was something out there that would give my life real meaning. Then I thought it would be when I began my career. But I was already more successful in a worldly career than I had ever anticipated, being a professor at Harvard. But there was still no meaning or purpose to life. And therefore, I fell into the darkest despair of my life at that point, lost in my thoughts. I had long since lost any hope in believing that God existed or anything like that, when from one moment to the next, the curtain between earth and heaven disappeared, and I found myself in the presence of God, very knowingly in the presence of God, and seeing my life as though I had died and was looking back over my life in the presence of God. And I saw in an instant that we live forever. I saw that every action has a moral content that's recorded for all eternity, that everything that had ever happened to me had been the most perfect thing that could have been arranged, coming from the hands of an all-knowing, all-loving God, not only including those things that had caused the most suffering at the time, that I had thought of as the greatest disasters, but especially the things that had caused the most suffering at the time. And I saw that my two greatest regrets after I died would be, number one, all of the time and energy I had wasted worrying about not being loved, when every moment of my existence I was held in an ocean of love greater than I ever imagined could exist, coming from this all-knowing, all-loving God. And the other great regret would be every hour I had wasted doing nothing of value in the eyes of heaven. I saw that here I had been so worried about life having no meaning, when in fact it has an infinite depth of meaning, because every moment contains the possibility of doing something of value in the eyes of heaven. And every time we take advantage of that opportunity, we will very truly be rewarded for it for all eternity. And every opportunity we let slip and don't take advantage of will be a lost opportunity for all. I also did something which bore great fruit, which was every night before I went to sleep, I would say a short prayer that I had made up to know the name of my Lord and God and Master who had revealed himself to me in that experience. And I wanted nothing other than to be as fully and completely Christian as possible. I obviously knew from this experience that the God who had revealed himself to me a year earlier had been Christ.
Martyrdom is not always proof. History is filled with examples of men and women who are committed to their religious views and were willing to die a martyr's death for what they believe. The hijackers who flew the planes into the Twin Towers, for example, well, they could be considered religious martyrs. Does their martyrdom testify to the truth of their beliefs? No. There's an important distinction that needs to be made here. You and I may die for what we believe today, trusting the testimony of those who were witnesses thousands of years ago. We were not there to see Jesus for ourselves, but we may believe that we have good reason to accept their testimony. Our martyrdom would therefore be a demonstration of this trust rather than a confirmation of truth. However, the original eyewitnesses were in a different position. They knew firsthand if their claims were true or not true. They didn't trust someone else for their testimony. They were making a first-hand assertion. The martyrdom of these original eyewitnesses is in a completely different category from the martyrdom of those who might follow them. If their claims were a lie, they would know it personally, unlike those who were martyred in the centuries that followed. Excerpts taken from Chapter 7 of Cold Case Christianity by homicide detective and ex-atheist J. Warner Wallace. For my commentary, I'd like to note that anti-Christian skeptics will respond to arguments like this with false equivalencies, more often than not, rather than addressing the substance of what's being said. They may say, well, what then about the initial believers in Islam? Which is something one could only say if they had not read nor studied the history of the Quran. The Quran is a testimony of one man, as he claimed to have heard it from a spiritual realm. He makes countless claims which contradict what dozens of Jews had written thousands of years prior to 700 years prior. There is simply no comparison. The Bible is a testimony of over 40 different individuals. These testimonies correspond well. Most claimed contradictions are easily defensible if one examines context and existing biblical scholarship. Another response may be, well, we only have testimony regarding these martyrs within the New Testament. False. One, it's reflective of illogical and anti-Christian bias to say we can't accept any evidence by those who believe in a specific claim, because then any evidence that comes up in favor of Christianity can be dismissed out of hand. If one were to deny all who believed that Plato existed and denied the authenticity of his authorship, one could just as easily dismiss the existence of Plato. In fact, even more easily than as the transcripts which we have from Plato come to us much later from original authorship than the testimonies we have from numerous writers of the books and letters expressed and represented in the New Testament. Two, again, it's simply false. It's false to say that the records we have of early Christian martyrs exist only within the pages of the New Testament. From the most trusted first century Jewish historian Josephus, we have records of it. It's ahistorical, as in it does not agree with the vast majority of scholarly historians to deny Josephus' testimony out of hand, and in doing so, it's likely an anti-Semitic bias. We have Josephus, we have Roman historian Tacitus, we have Clement, a bishop in Rome in the first century. We have many other historians and first century authors confirming the martyrdoms of the apostles and other Christians in the first century. So why then did they die? Why did those who claim to be eyewitnesses of Christ's resurrection die rather than recant, especially when separated and pressured in their own unique? I'll tell you why. They knew they'd be resurrected because they witnessed Christ's resurrection. Christ's resurrection, which was foretold by Yeshua himself. On this, they knew that regardless of the suffering presented to them in this realm, they would prosper in the next one. That concludes episode 1. Future episodes will include even smaller excerpts from Cold Case Christianity, but this point was essential to drive home, as conspiracy-based movies have made conspiracy theorists of many anti-Christian people who claim to be skeptics. If one is not skeptical of those who are affirming their beliefs, they are not a true skeptic. Christ is king and every knee will bow. Absolutely.